I heard my mother-in-law say my name the way people say a wrong answer out loud. Flat, final, like she'd already erased it. I was standing in the hallway of their Hamptons estate, barefoot on the cold marble, holding 2 glasses of sweet tea that nobody had asked for. I'd gone down to the kitchen because I couldn't sleep and I thought being useful might make me feel less invisible. I did that a lot back then. Made myself useful. Kept myself small. She was in the study with my husband. The door wasn't fully closed, just rested against the frame the way old doors do when the house has settled wrong. I could see the slice of lamplight on the hallway floor, and I could hear everything. She doesn't understand what she's sitting on, my mother-in-law said, and frankly, she never will. People like her don't. There was a pause. I waited for my husband to say something. He'd been with me for 9 years. We'd moved 4 times together. I'd packed his mother's crystal in dish towels when they relocated from Connecticut. I knew which side of the bed he needed to be on when he had back pain, and I knew he took his coffee with exactly 1 sugar, not 2, never 2. And I had thought I knew, that he was mine in the way that mattered most. She's a liability, he said. You know that. Dad knows that. It's just a question of when. I set both glasses of sweet tea down on the console table without making a sound. The ice shifted and I held my breath. Then my mother-in-law said, "Get it done before the end of the quarter." I walked back upstairs. I did not run. I did not cry. I sat on the edge of our bed in the dark, and I looked at the water out the window. The Atlantic, black and enormous. And I thought about the fact that I had let my own name on 3 different property deeds because my father-in-law said it was a tax advantage and I hadn't questioned it because I was 28 and I trusted people back then. I'm 37 now, and I stopped trusting people approximately 40 minutes ago. Let me back up because the Hamptons house wasn't where it started. It started the way a lot of things start, with a wedding that felt like a fairy tale and a family that felt like a warning I wasn't smart enough to read. His name is Fletcher. Fletcher Aldridge. His family owns a commercial real estate development firm that operates primarily along the eastern seaboard. Hotels, mixed-use developments, the kind of waterfront properties that get featured in architectural magazines and generate the kind of money that makes people forget to be kind. His mother's name is Patricia. His father is Robert. His older brother is Theo, who handles acquisitions and smiles at you exactly as long as he needs to. I met Fletcher at a fundraiser for a hospital foundation in Boston. I was there because my firm did their PR. He was there because the Aldridge Foundation had donated a pediatric wing. I thought he was handsome and a little nervous and not at all what I expected someone named Fletcher Aldridge to be like. He held the door open for a caterer. He laughed at his own jokes before he finished them. I liked him immediately, and that was probably the first mistake. We dated for 2 years. He proposed on a Tuesday, which I always thought was either very unromantic or very authentic. We were just in a kitchen eating takeout Thai, and he said, completely without ceremony, "I want to do this forever. Do you want to do this forever? Do you want to do this forever?" And I said yes, because I did. Because I meant it. Patricia was polite to me at the engagement dinner and cold to me at every dinner after. I told myself it was just how she was, that she'd come around. My own mother said, "Baby, cold women don't come around, they just get colder," and I laughed and told her she was being dramatic. My mother is rarely dramatic. The first time Robert, my father-in-law, mentioned putting my name on a property, it was casual, conversational. We were at their place in Palm Beach over the holidays, and he was talking about a new acquisition in Savannah, a boutique hotel they were converting. "We'll put it partly in your name," he said, pouring bourbon for both of us. "Fresh name, no history, cleaner for the filing. It's just how we structure things." I was 29. I was drinking good bourbon in a house that had a name. Actual name, painted on a tile by the front gate. And I nodded like I understood. I asked Fletcher about it that night, and he said, "It's just a tax thing, don't worry about it." I didn't ask again. Over the next 4 years, I signed things. Not recklessly. I always read the first page, which I now understand is exactly as useless as reading nothing at all. My name appeared on 2 LLCs, one in Georgia and one in Delaware. My name appeared on the deed to a condo complex in Charleston. My name appeared as a secondary stakeholder on a development project in coastal North Carolina. Each time, Robert explained it away in a different language and Fletcher translated it into something that sounded reasonable, and I nodded because I didn't want to be the kind of wife who made things difficult. Here's what I didn't know. The Aldridge family had been using those entities to move money around for years. Overstated development costs, underreported revenue, investors who were really just conduits, and a paper trail that was, apparently, quite deliberately designed to stop at whoever's name was on the documents. My name was on the documents. I found this out not from a lawyer or a government agency, which would have at least been efficient. I found it out standing barefoot in a Hamptons hallway holding sweet tea at midnight. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed next to my husband, and I thought about what I knew, and what I could prove, and what I needed to do, and in what order I needed to do. And in what order I needed to do it. The Atlantic made its sounds. Fletcher slept the way people sleep when they don't have anything on their conscience, which told me something I hadn't wanted to know about how long he'd been carrying this. In the morning, he kissed me on the forehead before he went down for coffee. I said good morning in a voice I didn't recognize, and then I locked the bathroom door and sat on the floor with my back against the tub and opened my laptop. I had 3 hours before he'd wonder where I was. The first thing I did was email my college roommate Bex, who'd become a forensic accountant, and who I'd always suspected had a mildly photographic memory for financial structures. I wrote, "Hey, I need your personal advice, not professional. Just advice. Can we talk today?" She replied in 11 minutes. "I'm free at 2. Call my cell." Bex never asks unnecessary questions. This is one of her best qualities. The second thing I did was search the name of every LLC I'd ever signed paperwork for. It took 40 minutes. What I found wasn't conclusive. Nothing is conclusive when you're a non-lawyer reading corporate filing databases at 7 in the morning, but it was enough. Enough to make my chest tight. Enough to make me understand what Robert had meant by fresh name, no history. My name. Fresh. No history. Meaning when the history finally came out, it would look like it was mine. The third thing I did was take photographs of every document I had with me. I brought a folder of household financial records because we were supposed to be doing estate planning paperwork that weekend, which was either ironic or not a coincidence at all. I photographed everything on my phone and then I airdropped it all to an old iPad I kept in my toiletry bag for travel reading, an iPad that was not connected to our shared Apple account, and I tucked it back under my moisturizer. Fletcher knocked on the door at 7:48. "You okay in there?" "Migraine," I said. "Be out in a minute. Do you want Advil?" "I've got some, thank you." I sat on the bathroom floor for another 4 minutes after that, listening to him walk away, and I thought, 9 years. I thought, I packed his mother's crystal in dish towels. I thought, get it done before the end of the quarter. The quarter ended in 6 weeks. Bex listened to the whole thing without interrupting. I was in the car, parked in the lot of a farm stand 2 miles from the estate, buying myself privacy with the fiction that I'd gone out for fresh corn. When I finished, there was a pause. "How many entities total?" she said. "That I know of. 2 LLCs and 2 properties. But I don't know what I don't know." "Okay." Another pause. "Do you know a family law attorney you trust? Someone not connected to the Aldridge family?" I didn't. But I knew someone who did. My aunt had gone through a vicious divorce 7 years ago, and she'd kept her attorney's card in her wallet ever since, the way veterans keep dog tags. I called her that evening while Fletcher and his parents were having drinks on the back patio. She gave me the name without asking why. Her name is Pauline, and she has the energy of a woman who was lied to once and restructured her entire life around never letting it happen again. I found her number and sent a text before I'd gotten back to the kitchen. Her attorney's name was Helen. She called me the next morning. She had a voice like someone who charges $600 an hour and considers it fair, which it is. "Walk me through what you've signed," she said. I walked her through it. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said something that I will probably think about for the rest of my life. "They gave you the gun and loaded it for you. They just assumed you'd never figure out it was in your hand. She explained it in terms I could follow. Because my name was on the entities, and because I could demonstrate I had received no financial benefit from them, and because I had documentation of the structure, documentation that showed the funds flowing in and out in ways I had no control over, I was not simply a target. I was, potentially, a witness. And witnesses, Helen said, have a kind of power that defendants do not. She told me to do nothing visible, to behave exactly as I normally would, to make no sudden moves financially, to keep every document I could access and to access them quietly. How long? I asked. Give me 3 weeks, she said. I gave her 3 weeks. I went back to the estate. I ate dinner with my mother-in-law and passed the salad and asked about the renovation plans for the Palm Beach house and listened to Robert explain the delays with the contractors, and I did not let a single thing show on my face. Patricia watched me the way she always watched me, like I was a word she didn't know the meaning of but didn't consider worth looking up. Fletcher was attentive that weekend in the way people are attentive when they feel guilty. He brought me coffee in bed on Sunday morning. He suggested we take a walk on the beach. I walked next to him and watched the water and thought about the LLC in Delaware and smiled at everything he said. We drove home to our apartment in Tribeca on Sunday night. He carried both bags upstairs without being asked. I said thank you. I meant something else entirely. Helen called at the end of week 2 with news I hadn't expected. The Delaware LLC, the first one Robert had put me on, had been the subject of a quiet federal inquiry for almost 8 months. Not public. Not charged yet, but watched. And because my name was on it, I'd been pulled into the peripheral radius of that watch, which was exactly what the Aldridge family had planned for me to be. Except that the thing about being in that radius is that it also means the people who run the inquiry would very much like to have a conversation. You have something they want, Helen said. You have your account of how this was presented to you, your documentation, and the fact that you can demonstrate that you received nothing and controlled nothing. That's valuable. What does that mean practically? I asked. It means you have options, she said. Real ones. There is a specific feeling that comes with understanding you have options when you thought you had none. It doesn't feel like relief exactly. It feels quieter than that. It feels like finding a door in a room you'd given up measuring. I told Helen to make the call. I want to be careful here about what I say and don't say, because some of this is still resolved and some of it is not. What I can tell you is that I met with 2 federal investigators on a Wednesday afternoon in an office in Lower Manhattan, and I brought Helen, and I answered every question they asked, and I handed over copies of everything I had. And when they asked me to describe how each piece of paperwork had been presented to me, I described it. Accurately. In detail. In the specific words Robert had used, which I had been replaying in my head with painful precision for 3 weeks. I did not cry during that meeting. I saved that for the Uber home. The paperwork for the separation was filed on a Friday. Helen had recommended I wait until that step was legally initiated before I told Fletcher anything directly, and I had agreed. And so when he came home from work to find me at the kitchen table with 2 packets of paper in front of me, he didn't know the context yet. I watched him understand what he was looking at. I watched it move across his face in stages. Confusion, then recognition, then something I'd never seen on him before, fear, and underneath it, something almost like relief, which told me something about how heavy a secret is when you've been carrying it for years. You know, he said. Not a question. I know, I said. He sat down. He didn't reach for the papers. He looked at me instead, and for a moment he looked exactly like the man I'd married. Not the Aldridge heir, not his mother's son, just Fletcher, who had laughed at his own jokes before he finished them and proposed on a Tuesday with cold pad dye going soft in the containers. I'm sorry, he said. I know you are, I said. And I did believe that. It didn't change anything, but I believed it. How long have you known? Long enough. He looked out the window. The city was doing its ordinary city things. Taxis, sirens, the particular low roar of 1 million people going about their evening. My parents are going to say, your parents, I said, have a different set of problems to focus on right now. He looked back at me. And then he looked at the packet again, and I watched him begin to understand the shape of what had happened. Not just the separation, but the whole geometry of it. The fact that he and his family had built a structure around me, and I had walked out of it through a door they hadn't seen me find. The Delaware LLC, he said. He was quiet for a long time. Were you scared? I was terrified, I said. I sat on the bathroom floor in the Hamptons for about 40 minutes, and I was absolutely terrified. And then I called Bex. Something passed over his face that might have been respect. It came 9 years too late, but I noted it. I moved to a sublet in Brooklyn Heights while things were in process. It was a one-bedroom with a view of a fire escape and a downstairs neighbor who played piano badly and enthusiastically at 10 o'clock every night, and I loved it with a ferocity that surprised me. I cooked actual food for the first time in years. I called my mother twice a week. I went running in the mornings along the promenade and watched the sun come up over Manhattan and thought about how strange it was to feel free in the middle of the most complicated legal situation of my life. Bex came over most Saturdays. She'd bring bagels, and I'd make coffee, and we'd sit at my small kitchen table, and she'd update me on what she was seeing in the financial analysis she'd done. Not officially, just as my friend, just helping me understand the terrain. The structure the Aldridges had built was, she said, almost impressive in its complexity. Almost, she said, except they got lazy about the names. That's always where it falls apart. They reuse the same names. They get comfortable. They had gotten comfortable. The federal case moved on its own timeline and in its own way, and I'm not going to detail it here because it's not fully mine to detail. What I can tell you is that when you cooperate fully and you can demonstrate good faith and you have an attorney like Helen, the process is not what you feared it would be. It is paperwork and meetings and more paperwork and occasional long silences in conference rooms while people read documents, and it is exhausting, but it is survivable, and at the end of it, you are not a target. The divorce was finalized 11 months after that night in the Hamptons. It was, given everything, relatively clean. Fletcher did not fight me on much. I think he was tired. I think he'd been tired for longer than I'd known him. I took what was legally mine from our shared life, which was less than what I might have expected, but more than what I'd had when I arrived, which was nothing. What I took that mattered most was my name back. Not in the dramatic way, not some legal restoration. Just in the simple fact of using it again, without the weight of what the Aldridges had attached to it. My name is Petra. Petra Calloway, which I went back to. It fits me the way it always did, the way your real name always fits when you've been using someone else's for too long. Patricia, I am told, stopped speaking to Fletcher when she understood the full shape of what had happened. Not because he'd failed to protect her, but because he'd underestimated me, which in Patricia's world is apparently the greater sin. Robert retained 3 separate attorneys. Theo, the older brother, has become very quiet on social media, which is the modern equivalent of someone keeping a low profile. I don't follow any of them. I have a rule about that now. My sublet turned into a real lease. I started consulting independently, which I'd always said I would do someday, and never had a reason to start until I had no other choice, and it turns out I'm quite good at it. Better than I was when I was trying to make myself useful in someone else's framework. I have clients now. I have my own name on my own company filing, in Delaware actually, which I consider a minor act of reclamation. Last spring, I went back to the farm stand near the Hamptons estate. Not to the estate itself, I don't have any reason to go there, but to the farm stand, because they have sweet corn from July through September, and it's genuinely the best I've ever had. I bought 2 dozen ears and drove back to the city with all the windows down and the radio loud and the corn in the back seat, and somewhere around the Midtown Tunnel, I started laughing, just laughing for no articulable reason, and I couldn't stop. Bex says I seem lighter. My mother says I seem like myself. I think they're describing the same thing. Here's what I'll say about the whole of it, because people ask me sometimes what the lesson is. As if there has to be a lesson, as if life parcels itself out in morals. I don't think I was naive. I think I was trusting, which is not the same thing, and I think there's a difference between trusting the wrong person and trusting wrong. I trusted correctly, mostly. I trusted Bex. I trusted my aunt. I trusted Helen. I trusted myself eventually, on a bathroom floor at 7 in the morning, with the Atlantic outside and 6 weeks until the end of the quarter. The people who thought I was the weakest piece on the board were the same people who put my name on everything. They gave me the gun. They loaded it. They just never considered that I might be a better shot than they were. I've thought a lot about what it actually takes to walk through something like this. Not survive it in a dramatic, movie poster kind of way, but actually move through it, day by day, dinner by dinner, with your face perfectly calm while your whole understanding of your own life is rearranging itself underneath you. What I keep coming back to is this: the Aldridges didn't fail because they were unlucky. They failed because they stopped paying attention to the person they decided didn't matter. That's how it usually works. The people who get comfortable in their power tend to get sloppy about the people they've written off, and that sloppiness is where everything unravels. Robert was meticulous about the entities, about the filings, about the paper trail, and completely careless about me. He signed my name on things without ever once asking himself what I would do if I found out. He assumed the answer was nothing. That assumption was the crack in the whole structure. I wasn't a strategist. I wasn't sitting in that marriage playing a long game. I was just a woman who went downstairs for sweet tea and heard something she wasn't supposed to hear, and then had to decide in real time what kind of person she was. That's what those moments actually are. Not turning points in some grand narrative, but just small decisions made in the middle of the night when nobody's watching. Call Bex or don't. Email Helen or don't. Tell the truth in that conference room or sit on your hands and hope it goes away on its own. I called. I emailed. I told the truth. And here's what I want to say about that, because I think it matters. None of those decisions required courage in the way people romanticize courage. They required clarity. I had to be clear-eyed enough to understand my actual situation, instead of the situation I wished I was in. I had to be honest with myself about what Fletcher was, which meant letting go of 9 years of a story I'd built around him. That's not dramatic. That's just painful and slow and necessary. The intelligence part, the forensic accountant part, the attorney part, the understanding of how LLCs work. I didn't have to know any of that. I just had to be smart enough to know who did, and humble enough to call them. That's the thing nobody tells you about getting through something hard. You don't have to be the expert. You just have to be willing to reach for the people who are, and trust your own read on who those people are. I trusted Bex because I'd known her for 15 years, and she'd never once made a decision to make herself look better at someone else's expense. I trusted Helen because I heard the way she talked about what had been done to me, not with outrage, not with performance, just with precision, and precision felt like safety. The part I'm still working out is the part about Fletcher. I believe he was sorry. I think he'd been sorry for a long time, but sorry in private, sorry you never act on. Sorry you carry around while still showing up to your parents' dinner table and passing the salad. That's not really sorry. That's just discomfort wearing sorry's clothes. What I deserved and what I've decided to require going forward is someone whose integrity holds even when it's inconvenient. Especially then. I'm Petra Calloway again. I have a company in Delaware with my name on it, and a lease in Brooklyn Heights, and a downstairs neighbor who plays piano badly, and I think that's plenty for now. Some mornings I run along the promenade and I watch the sun come up over the city, and I feel something I don't have a perfect word for. Not happiness exactly, more like alignment. Like I finally fit inside my own life again. That's what they almost took from me. Not the money, not the name on the documents, just this. The ordinary, specific feeling of being exactly who you are, in exactly the right place, with nothing to hide and no one to perform for. You don't know what that's worth until someone tries to take it, and then you find out you'll do quite a lot to get it back.